The global geopolitical chessboard of 2026 has just been struck by a diplomatic earthquake whose shockwaves promise to redraw not only the map of the South Atlantic, but the very essence of Western alliances. What began as a whisper in the corridors of the Pentagon has transformed into a crisis of historic proportions following the leak of an internal memorandum this Friday. The document, which circulated among the highest echelons of the U.S. Department of Defense, proposes something that, until the start of Operation Epic Fury against Iran, would have been considered political heresy. A complete and deliberate review of the American position regarding the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands. This shift is not the result of a sudden documentary discovery or a new interpretation of international law. It is, in fact, a maneuver of raw, naked retaliation. Donald Trump, acting with the impetuosity that defines his foreign policy, is furious with the reluctance of Keir Starmer's British government to provide unconditional and massive military support in the total war against the Tehran regime. For Trump, loyalty is a one-way street, and London's refusal to fully commit to the American war effort has resulted in the activation of a list of reprisals that hits the very heart of British national pride. By classifying the Falkland Islands as a remaining European imperial possession in the memo, the Pentagon has sent an unequivocal signal. The era of automatic diplomatic cover is over. To understand the gravity of this shift, one must look at the history of relations between the two nations. Since 1833, the United Kingdom has exercised de facto sovereignty over the archipelago, a position defended with blood in 1982. At that time, the Ronald Reagan administration, though initially hesitant due to its ties with the Argentine military junta, ultimately became the invisible architect of the British victory. It was the provision of real-time satellite intelligence, state-of-the-art AIM-9L Sidewinder missiles, and the logistical use of Ascension Island that ensured Margaret Thatcher's fleet was not annihilated by Argentine super-editors today. 44 years later, Reagan's successor threatens to do the exact opposite. The memorandum does not just speak of neutrality, it suggests a tilt toward Buenos Aires' claim as a way to punish London for its cautious stance in Operation Epic Fury. The reaction in London has been a mixture of shock, disbelief, and fury. Prime Minister Keir Starmer was categorical in stating that the sovereignty of the islands is non-negotiable and that the islanders' right to self-determination is a sacred pillar of British foreign policy. However, the weight of the government's words seems to diminish in the face of a Washington that no longer recognizes special relationships unless they are accompanied by armored divisions and aircraft carriers in American conflict zones. The conservative opposition, led by Kemi Badenoch, called the proposal an absolute absurdity, but the deepest impact was felt among veterans. Simon Weston, whose scars from burns suffered in the attack on the RFA Sir Galahad at Bluff Cove serve as a living reminder of the cost of war, expressed the sentiment of thousands when he said that the islanders are not pieces in a political chess game. Peter Robinson, the commando immortalized in the iconic photograph advancing through the frozen mountains with the Union Jack on his rucksack, was even more incisive, describing Trump's tactics as the behavior of a bully who dishonors the memory of those who sacrificed everything in 1982. Meanwhile, in Buenos Aires, the atmosphere is one of cautious expectation, rapidly turning into diplomatic euphoria. Javier Milei, the Argentine president who has built an almost indestructible ideological bridge with the conservative wing of the United States, sees in this crisis the opportunity of a lifetime. Milei has been a fervent advocate for reclaiming the Malvinas, but through a strategy of diplomatic seduction and gradual military strengthening, rather than the bellicose adventure of 1982. He knows that with Trump in the White House, the rules of the game have changed. The Argentine government has already secured significant victories, such as the transfer of Danish F-16 fighters, a negotiation only made possible because the United States exerted unprecedented pressure on the United Kingdom not to use its veto power over British components in these aircraft. With these jets, Argentina regains for the first time in decades the capability to contest airspace in the South Atlantic, a development that British defenses at Mount Pleasant observe with growing concern. The technical detailing of the memorandum reveals that the Pentagon is analyzing the impact of withdrawing support for the British in international forums, such as the UN and the OAS. If the United States begins to refer to the archipelago as Malvinas in official documents or simply abstains in crucial votes, the United Kingdom will face a diplomatic isolation that will make maintaining the islands a long-term, unsustainable political burden. Furthermore, there is the aspect of intelligence cooperation. Currently, the Mount Pleasant base relies on a global network of satellites and communications that is heavily integrated with American systems. A technical disconnection, even if partial, would leave the British garrison blind to the movements of an Argentine Air Force now modernized with NATO technology provided by the Americans themselves. The irony reaches its peak when looking at Middle East policy. Trump argues that global stability depends on the destruction of Iran's offensive capability, and that any ally that does not join this mission is effectively working against the interests of the West. Under this distorted logic, punishing the United Kingdom by withdrawing support in the Falklands is seen as a market correction in geopolitics. The message sent by Washington is that American protection now comes with an annual subscription price paid in blood and military resources. For Argentina, this represents a historic window of opportunity. Foreign Minister Pablo Quirno has already signaled that the country is ready to resume bilateral negotiations, seizing the moment when London is most vulnerable. Milei, in turn, uses his direct line to the White House to position Argentina as the reliable strategic partner in the Southern Hemisphere. In opposition to a Europe he describes as slow and bureaucratic. Economic impact also cannot be ignored. The waters surrounding the Falklands are rich in fishing resources and possess oil potential that arouses the greed of global corporations. Until now, American support guaranteed the legal security for British and rational companies to exploit these resources under London's license. If sovereignty is questioned by the world's greatest power, legal risk will skyrocket, driving away investment and suffocating the island's economy. Trump knows he can strangle the viability of the Falklands without firing a single shot, merely by creating uncertainty. For King Charles III, whose state visit to Washington is scheduled for next week, the scenario could not be more humiliating. He will arrive in a capital that is openly discussing the dismemberment of one of his crown's most symbolic territories. Ultimately, the Pentagon memorandum signals the end of diplomacy based on shared values and the beginning of an era of raw transactions. If Washington offers diplomatic cover, it will be because it received something equivalent in return on the battlefield. The United Kingdom, which for decades prided itself on its special relationship with the United States, now discovers that, in Trump's view, this relationship is just another contract that can be cancelled for non-payment. For the 255 British military personnel and 650 Argentines who died in 1982, history seems to be circling back around an axis of pure political pragmatism. Operation Epic Fury in Iran may have its outcome decided in the Persian Desert, but its most lasting consequences may be felt in the icy waters and peatlands of the Malvinas, where the fate of a people is being used as a bargaining chip in a revenge that no one predicted. The signal to the world is clear. No one is safe under the American umbrella if they are not willing to march under Trump's orders. For the United Kingdom, it is a bitter awakening. For Argentina, it is the resurgence of a nationalist dream that now has the albeit vengeful backing of the greatest military power in history. We are witnessing the end of traditional diplomacy. Washington's message is clear: either you march with us or you stand alone. If you value deep geopolitical insights like this, leave a like and share this video with your military groups. Let's make sure this information reaches more people.